I make you nervous, Bigger?
Careful. No, ma'am.
I want you to take me to the Loop. I'm not going to the university. But you can forget I said that.
Ma'am.
I think I can trust you. After all, I'm on your side. You aren't a tattletale, are you?
No, ma'am. Not a tattletale, ma'am.
Take the outer drive to 16 Lake Street. We're going to meet a friend of mine who's also a friend of yours.
A friend of mine.
You'll understand it better by and by. Isn't there a song like that your people sing?
Yes.
If anyone should ask, then, I went to the university. See, Bigger?
Yes.
There he is. Stop the car.
Don't be nervous. Mary told me all about you. How are you, Bigger?
Fine, sir.
Come on and shake.
Shake his hand, Bigger. Go on.
Yes.
I'm a friend of Mary's.
Yes, sir.
Oh, no, Bigger, don't let go.
Yes, sir.
And don't say sir to me. I'll call you Bigger and you call me Jan. How's that?
It's all right, Bigger. Jan means it.
What do these people want?
Don't pull your hand away! We are officially comrades.
All right. Hands Up, 7 Testaments, a presentation of the new Blackfest, was written in response to the police shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson and others that have evoked so much anger and despair over the past couple of years. Now, it's part of this month's first Saturday at the Brooklyn Museum, and here with us now are Kamila Forbes, the director. Welcome to
Hi,
BKL.
thank you. Thank you very much.
All of you.
Thank you.
And Nambi Kelley, whose Native Son adaptation we just witnessed there, and one of the 7 young playwrights presenting their monologues this weekend. Welcome, Nambi.
Thank you.
First, I want to say just amazing piece that we just saw right there. So congratulations and thank you. Can you tell us how that piece relates to Hands Up?
Well, as we all know, Native Son is a very gut-wrenching tale of young Bigger Thomas on the south side of Chicago and all of the forces that are against him in terms of racism and his rage around racism. And one of the things that it connects for me personally in terms of my process, when I was adapting the novel, everything was going on in the news, like Trayvon's, George Zimmerman had just been acquitted. All of that was happening, and actually, everything with that was directly influential in terms of my process, in terms of how do we create empathy, how do we get inside this young black boy, and how do we understand him from the inside as opposed to the outside. And I think that the Hands Up series that Keith Atkins has so brilliantly curated is very much connected to how do we get inside, how do we empathize with these young people who these forces are against, how do we get inside them, how do we understand them, and how do we connect to their humanity as opposed to, let's judge the picture, let's judge what's in the frame as opposed to the person, the living soul. And so I think that definitely is what the thrust of Hands Up is.
So Kamila, we know Nambi would probably say, yes, writing a play is a huge process and an undertaking, and we think of poetry as something that's much more immediate. It's still a process, but it has that direct action response.
Sure.
So how do you blend those sort of things together and make a form like Hands Up?
Well, I mean, I think I have to give credit to the curator, who's Keith Joseph Atkins, and the founding artistic director of the new Blackfest. And his approach to producing and creating art is always responsive. So immediately, after the Mike Brown incident, he put a call out to 7 playwrights to actually write responsive pieces. And they were specifically strategic to be monologues, right? 10-minute monologues, so that they can be responsive, immediate, and completely reflective of the times, which quite frankly is what art should be. And so it's really exciting when that happens, because in my just personal aesthetic, that's sort of where I like to sit. When I look at a piece or I'm looking to direct a piece, it's always like, how does it relate to what's happening in our world today? And if I can't necessarily find it in that way, I don't know how to have a conversation with an audience.
So, you're talking about the curatorial process and the person that was able to help you sort of bring all these amazing playwrights together.
Sure.
But what would you say is some of the other underlying themes in the pieces?
I think a lot of the underlying themes is identity, personal responsibility, the policing of the Black body. I think those are some of the larger themes. And I think what's really interesting is that we have 6 male writers, and Nambi is our only female writer. And her piece is directly in response to the Sandra Bland incident. So I'll let her talk a little bit more about that since she's here.
Absolutely.
As far as themes.
Yes, that Sandra Bland, it was a piece that I was already working on, and Keith came to me and he said, what is your response to this? And so it was a piece that I took, and I then really sort of filled it out with the outrage of this young woman driving from Chicago, right, to Texas, where I also have family. And it's just so outrageous to me. And for me, like, it really connected something that I wasn't dealing with, which was something that had happened to me personally in an incident with the police. That all of these conversations sort of was like, whoa, you need to deal with this. And so that when I fleshed out and finalized my piece, that it was a perfect opportunity to really understand for myself how personal that was for me, how outrageous and egregious it was what happened to that young woman.
It's amazing how much an injustice can sort of shorten that bridge of history from native son to right now.
Yeah.
And there's a question in there somewhere, but I'm looking at you, and I wondered how you sort of make that relevant today with all that's going on, where it's like we're looking at the bad old days and some bad right now, but how do you bring that and revive that story of like a bigger, like a tragic character when we're looking at dead bodies in the street?
Yeah. For me, I didn't have to do nothing, right? Because Richard Wright did everything for me. He intentionally created Bigger Thomas as a monster. And the question was, for me, in this new generation, how do we break down the monster? How do we understand the young boy who made those choices? And how do we create that as a bridge to empathize with other young people and the choices that they have to make to survive? And for me, it was a process and it was arduous, but I didn't have to do anything but listen, honestly. Listen and be available to what's true.
Okay. Kamila, can you tell us how your work on Deaf Poetry Jam sort of influenced you? Sure. And can you also allude to how you're able to draw a younger audience? Because that is a program that some youth may not be familiar with.
Sure. That's so funny.
It doesn't take long.
You still look good.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
And specifically, how does poetry and the monologues, that sort of medium, allow to get out a very strong message in a very short, pointed way?
Sure. So, so my work on Deaf Poetry Jam is I was a producer of the series that was on for 7 seasons on HBO, and a big part of my work was about identifying who the poets were, curating the content of what we saw every week on HBO on that show, and again, like I said, I was attracted to it because it, like poetry, like hip hop, it was immediate and it was the social. It was like our modern day CNN of my community,
you
right?
You can watch it with your mama too.
And you can watch it with your mama, and it's artful, right? And it's culture, but at the same time, it's speaking to topics that were relevant to me. And I was watching young people who looked like me, speaking about issues that were directly affecting my life, and it was inquiry and asking questions in a forum that charged me up, right? That got me moving just towards social action. And so I think what's interesting, and I think that's what poetry does, and it has the opportunity to do in 3 minutes, right? Because it's just a bite-sized nugget, and you get your message, and then you're off. And the same thing I think that's interesting also in this format is because these are 10-minute monologues, is that there's a message encoded in a very short period of time. That's not to take away from full-length plays, because I absolutely love sort of that full-length 2-hour journey. It's just a different form and medium.
I'm just thinking about, Def Comedy Jam, Def Poetry Jam, Russell Simmons will come out and say, you know, thanks for coming out.
Yep.
God bless.
Yeah.
Good night.
Absolutely.
But, you know, like you were saying, that audience was just so empowering, and to see the people, you know, that would grace the stage to speak so eloquently and passionately about, you know, quite oftentimes very tragic events, you know, really helped you to relate to that person.
Sure.
So can you piggyback on that?
For me, it's all about how do you relate and how do you connect and how do you get on the inside. And the thrust of my work is that, is what's the internal mechanism and how do you get inside someone to understand where they are and be with them in that space.
So we invoked Sandra Bland. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the PBS project that's coming up. So we've got a still there, just
Okay,
of
great.
a little thing,
Great.
but tell us about what's happening there.
Great. So The Women's List is a 60-minute documentary that I was graced to be an executive producer on, that'll be airing on PBS, that aired on PBS but is continually there on pbs.org. But basically it profiles women from all different walks of life, from Rosie Perez, as we know, Latina actress, to fashion designers,
To our neighbor over
The
here.
New Yorker.
to our neighbor over here, exactly. You know, also to Nia Wardlaw, who is she's a pilot. She's a black female pilot. She's one of 20 in the United
That
States.
many?
Only 20 flying commercially.
Wow.
And they're all sharing, they're not, you know, these aren't huge glamorous stories, but these
Yeah.
are just sort of everyday stories. And like Nambi said, to get on the inside, how do we find a way into humanity? Well, I share my personal narrative,
Yeah.
you know, to hear someone like, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg talk about sort of her life as a 12-year-old young girl, you know.
I don't want to cut you off. We are running out of time.
Sure.
Do you have anything that you're currently working on that you want to give us a sort of sneak preview about, or?
Oh, sure. I have a show opening in Chicago called Jabari Dreams of Freedom. And it's actually in alignment with all of this. It's a children's play being produced at Chicago Children's Theater. And it is about a little boy who is afraid to leave the house because of the news. And he lives on the south side of Chicago in Inglewood. And so his father becomes Barack Obama. And he takes him on a journey inside a painting. I'm all about the inside. Takes a journey on the inside of a painting, and he meets children from the civil rights movement.
Okay.
And it plays it, yeah.
So don't tell us all, but
I won't.
Just on the backdrop of that, they just announced that Chicago just had the bloodiest,
See you in Chicago.
bloodiest month on record. So, all right.
It's my city.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
Well, tomorrow on BK Live, what do those caucuses in the cornfields of Iowa mean to Republicans here in Brooklyn? Our young GOP pals, the two vetoes, will join us to talk Cruz, Trump, Rubio, and the results from yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Then we're also putting you right in the midst of a thrilling sporting event. It involves an ice rink, a net, a plastic ball, and some sticks that aren't brooms, but they must have been brooms at some point because it's called Broomball. Somehow the sport has glided down from Canada and found its way to Brooklyn, and we've got it covered.
Then we'll meet and hear DJ Poetic, who's coming here for this month's Brick House Poetry Slam tomorrow night, and is getting ready to play his music and spit as part of Brooklyn's first entry into the National Poetry Slam competition. Thank you so much for watching BK Live. That's Brian. I'm Aaron.